Welcome to the Business Spotlight. I'm Gary Crosby. I'm delighted to be joined today by Karl Spencer. He's the co-founder of Midgard Acquisitions. I'm not going to tell you anything about them. Karl, thanks for joining me today.
More than welcome. Yeah, nice to see you. Thanks for having me on.
You too. You too. So let's get off to the start with a little bit of context. Tell us what you do and how long you've been doing it.
Sure. So I wear a few hats, and what I do currently is myself and business partner Peter. We set up in effect, like a brokerage consultancy at the institutional level in real estate. So Midgard Acquisitions, in essence, we're like a facilitator, probably the best way to describe it. So large sort of funds and that require large assets, lots of apartments or housing and things of that nature. And what we then do is we tee that up with developers and construction companies, but mainly developers that are building these schemes, and we match the two together. And that's essentially what we do. And generally, it's I have to say it's been a learning curve in the real estate market, because in institutional levels, we can go through this if you want. I think it's an interesting topic, but the leveling of the world that they live in is into the tune of millions and millions and millions. You know, it's kind of generally 20 million up to 200 million in terms of the developments that we operate in.
Yeah.
And initially, when we first started in those numbers, you know, it's very difficult to get your head round. And you know,
lots of noughts.
It's lots of noughts. And of course, you know, in the main, we'll hear of things like recession and difficulties and challenges, and of course, how you raise funding and all of these natures. But the reality, of course, is there's lots and lots of money around. It's just tapping into that river that's flowing. And that's essentially what we've done a couple of years ago.
Okay. And obviously we're seeing some quite seismic shifts in the economy at the moment, with interest rates going back up to what might be considered to be historic levels. What are you noticing about the environment out there?
Yeah, well, what was interesting is that when, let's call it I'm not quite sure if I'm going to call it the trust debacle, but what happened in, let's be honest, last August, September, when it fell apart. And we were really getting an insight from the funds, because we deal directly with them that are buying these sort of large assets, you know, very frequently, 50 million, 100 million, 200 million, and all sorts. And we were getting all these WhatsApps really within weeks of this kind of debacle. We're pulling out, this is pulling out, we're no longer funding, to the tune of hundreds of millions was pulling out of the market. This was really in the space of 4 or 5 weeks. And at the time we got this window, and Peter and I at the time said, if we're hearing this is really gonna hurt the public. And we're getting a real early window as to institutionally what was coming out of the market. And then all of a sudden, 4 or 5 weeks later, of course, all of us were having the hit on mortgages and so on. So it was now what's happened since, to paint a bit more of a colourful picture to it, is that it's not all doom and gloom. You know, it's a very different place now as to what it was in when that happened. It's just everything has become realigned. So the yields that these big institutions search for has just been reappraised, and of course then land values then have to be reappraised, and construction is then reappraised, and it kind of all then finds a leveling for it to continue. And so that's kind of what's happening now. But so it's like a very short reassessment window.
And what kind of trends can you see coming in the future then? Are we going to see a reshaping of that kind of part of the market?
It's a reshaping of how those structures have been done. So you don't forget, it's been almost like a perfect nightmare storm in a way, where you had the construction costs go up and you had the interest rates go up, and you had, you know, so it made things a bit more challenging. And but all of this money still needs to be deployed. So all of these, you know, a term called BTR, and for those of you that are not familiar with BTR, build to rent schemes, they're kind of blocks of apartments that's got amenities, health clubs and gyms and things of that nature, more of an amenitized block of apartments rather than just flats. And these have been built to the tune of thousands and thousands all over the country. And that's becoming more and more common.
Mm.
That because of it's becoming more difficult for the average person to buy a house and get a mortgage, and of course the rental market is becoming increased. And the only way to keep up demand is institutions then have to drop into place to then have them shared barbecue areas and social places and places that you want to bring your friends. And it's becoming more like other countries have got. We're definitely going that direction because of the. So that's becoming a lot more apparent. And on top of that is housing associations. There's so much liquidity with lots and lots of housing associations, and lots of funding that's coming through for that. Again, to the tune of thousands of units a year. So they're probably the two biggest upward trends, I would say. Yeah.
So it's almost like a sort of Europeanization, if you like, of that part of it. My son lives in a large amenitized block in the center of Berlin, built very recently for exactly this purpose, and the bottom floor of it is the gym and the social areas and everything else that you need to actually just live in that block if you really want to. So I wonder if we're moving that way and seeing that being the preferred method, if you like, of young adults, how they want to live.
It is, and actually, in a way, for example, now there's a new legislation that's coming in that says that you need two means of escape, where traditionally there's just one set of stairs or something. And so really what's starting to happen is everything's kind of, I don't want to say being improved, but it had to be improved. Like there's things like BREEAM sort of stamp of approval, which is how's the building being built? Has it got zero carbon? Is it going to be equal male and female working in the block to manage the asset? And so it's kind of been looked at as like this blended, improved building, if you like. And so everything's kind of having to meet probably more strict guidelines in opposed to what has typically been sometimes dirty blocks of apartments that get left to rack and ruin by lazy or complacent landlords. So I think it had to go that way. But anyway, and that's kind of really where we saw the opportunity, I suppose, as a couple of guys looking as to what's possible in the market. And really, the biggest challenge is they're very clunky, they're very long-winded. You can take a year from something that gets looked at to becoming an acquisition. So these are very long-winded acquisitions. But interesting, Gary, what we were talking about the other day about sort of human-to-human communication and activity. We found that you could very easily look at these as faceless funds, if you like, and ultimately they're not. They're human beings, no different to you and I, and they have a way of communicating or not, because it can sometimes be quite transactional. And a lot of developers are very good at building and developing. Not just there's many that are very, very good at communicating with funds, but there are equally as many that aren't. So we kind of wanted to fit in there and to say somehow facilitate that communication being less transactional, then maybe we can help have a small imprint.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd like to cover that, but there's a little bit of me that's curious about your entrepreneurial journey. Anybody who looks you up on LinkedIn will see this, this endless entrepreneurial spirit, if you like. I'm just wondering how that started. What was the initial motivation for you to, not work for somebody else, but to go on into business on your own?
Yeah, well, it's quite a personal reason. And when some of us have an event that can disconnect your wires and your wires reconnect in a different way. And that was both my parents are no longer here, unfortunately. They both passed away, and both passed away of cancer. And when my mum was diagnosed, this had been 2014, my mum was diagnosed of having pancreatic cancer.
Right.
And I was working for a property company in Peterborough at the time. A lot of education and lots of public speaking at the time, and I was kind of thrust into a a personal self-development world that I hadn't been exposed to previously. So I was in that world anyway, albeit I was working for a company. And at the time, it was like a sledgehammer. It was the day that my mum called to say that she'd been diagnosed was my mind twisted to why is disconnected, because you're in shock. You know, you're faced with your parents' mortality, which is something that's difficult to get your head round.
Yeah.
However, what it did was mum's facing real fear. You know, what have I got? What have I got to fear, really? And you know, because you're thinking, should I try something new or do something different? And that was really the catalyst. Really, it was up until that point, I'd played with it, thought about it, looked, read books. You can imagine you're in that company. And literally 3 months later, I handed my notice in. You know, it was very much a catalyst. And ever since then, it's you don't get me wrong, you get tested and challenged, and you know, and it's not easy, and you question, should you do this, and all of these are very, there's lots of things for us to talk about, but at the that was the catalyst.
So when you think about that moment and that catalyst for change, and then you step into the entrepreneurial world, and I see amongst my clients and the business owners that I've worked with in Peterborough over the last 5 years, you know, very different personal traits. What do you think are the important personal traits in a successful entrepreneur?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm not sure if I've got the answer. I think it's an ongoing one, because of course you adapt and change, and and I would say for me, resilience. You know, I can't. It's such an overused term, but it's you know, whatever you think, it's like doing it's like building something. It's going to cost double the amount. It's going to take double the time. You know, whatever you think it's going to do, it's going to be harder. It doesn't go to plan. When you meet someone, you just don't know how something's going to flourish from whatever you see or speak. So I think resilience is the ticket, because whatever you think something's going to be, it isn't. Sometimes it's great. In fact, Gary Vaynerchuk, for those of you that either listen to him or not, Gary V on YouTube, he speaks a lot about this. Don't fall in love or hang your hat on the ups, because you try to be, if you can, be a bit more emotionally neutral, because it's because you become I think a little bit more emotionally stable through it, where you know, I think at the beginning you hang your hat on those really good times, or those good things that go right. But
I think it's you know, the reading that I've done over the last 5 years, particularly because, again, I came out of a corporate environment that you know, that wasn't big on this kind of personal development stuff, but emotional regulation comes up over and over and over again. This idea that, you know, successful people are able to just take a breath and then choose how they react, rather than just, you know, going up or going down in emotional levels. I think emotional regulation is a key asset for any entrepreneur.
Oh, interesting. You do, yeah. And you know, it's interestingly, it's almost been like it's been punched into me, because you know, I wish I could have met you before, because that's not something I guess I've been taught or spoken to about. It's where I've gone, I need to regulate this, because it's not, I can't, you know what I mean? Because I think also you carry it into every other aspect of your life. You know, how you've had a good day, and you walk into, I work from home most of the time. So of course my 2 girls come home, and you can't carry that.
No.
Because of course it's inconsistent for your children.
No.
And so I think it's anyway, it's a whole subject.
That's a good one.
I think resilience helps you.
So resilience is important, and I completely agree with that. So thinking back to those early days, or even since, as you've set up these multiple different companies in the property environment, what were the biggest obstacles for you?
the biggest obstacles, and isn't it funny? The second you say something, you flash straight. You flash straight. Yeah. But I can give you specifics, but I wouldn't want to bore you with the whole ins and outs of the actual particular developments and stuff. I'm talking the new build developments is probably the biggest challenge. I think business relationships, I think they can be challenging. I think but you only know when you start working with someone, or equally when they start working with you. I think sometimes that's something, one of the biggest challenges that I've learned is, I've been in previous relationships with before my wife and I, and you're a nice person and they're a nice person, but you put yourself in together and the two ingredients just don't make a nice drink, no matter how you stir it. And so sometimes that happens, I think, with business relationships. So that's been a big challenge. And that can be, once you're in and you bought the house and you've got your children, it's not quite so easy to walk away from. And it's the same as a business partnership. So the more you married in and the more things go on, that's been big lessons. So what to look out for, but I think a lot of that is how you monitor yourself and understand yourself more, and that's come out of all of that. So that I think has been a big challenge. But probably one of the biggest obstacles is probably not necessarily chasing the pretty penny. I think that's almost not chasing the pretty penny, because it's the thing to do. I think that's very easily done, because when I've certainly found, as being an entrepreneur, when you're working somewhere, you've got your parameters, haven't you? You've got your box, there's your role, there's your job description. When you're an entrepreneur, you can do anything, everything. There's no, you've got no box someone can put you in, other than your wife or your husband or your partner or whatever. Your circumstances, your social circumstance, where you live, and the whole host of other things. But I think, that's probably the biggest thing, to try and probably at times narrow what you're looking at, because I think that you can get overwhelmed, and then you end up doing a lot of things really badly.
Great advice for someone who's thinking about becoming an entrepreneur. And interesting that the one of the big challenges about business relationships and being in the right relationship with the right person, mixing the right drink, if you like, is that actually the flip side of that is it could be the biggest opportunity ever.
You got to test. And equally, I think you're right. We've even been that ourselves, but you enter into any relationship, friendship. I've got some very, very, very small good friends, not high, but it's a small amount, and because it needs investment. Something needs investment. You've got to go all in to have a nice marriage. You've got to go all in to, be a good father. You've got, all of these things require your unconditional all in. And I think you've got to do the same with a business relationship, and sometimes it doesn't work out.
Let's just pop back to one thing that you said that really resonated with me about the importance of understanding yourself as part of that personal development journey. Where do we start with that? Where do if you've been in an environment? I was in the military for 31 years, and nobody said to me that you should be self-aware and start to understand the way you behave and the way other people see you and so on and so forth. So it was a bit of a revelation to me when I started to study it in a bit more depth. Where do you start with self-awareness and knowing yourself well?
It's such an amazing subject, it really is a fascinating subject, because it's yourself, isn't it? So you know what I mean. You can really go to town on. What I think is a very, very good way is you've got to test what you say, test what you say to yourself, test what you say to others. And also take a moment. If you, the real difficulty, I think, with self-awareness is so many people just say something, don't really consider, off they go, or they're being flippant with what they're saying, or they're not being conscious by I'll give a good example. So when I believe anyway, so this is not, you know, this is kind of just my personal how I go about perhaps being the best, or try to be the best version of myself as I can, is when you're having children. I think it's an amazing mirror as to what goes on. It's the best way, because they're one, they're unconditional, but two, they are, you know, harsh with their delivery.
Yes.
You know,
no filters.
So, you know, and certainly my oldest is 9 years old, and so Scarlett will come to the door, and she's about to leave the door in the morning to go to school, and her friends will come around and see her in the morning. And look, it is what it is. You know, different people have different circumstances. You know, she's got friends where parents are maybe have got other challenges that we don't, either from mentally to financially to their relationship with their partners to could be complacent. They could be given some neglect to the children. There's a whole host of things. You can see it all.
Yeah.
And so I think for myself, so a great example of this is I take it very, very, very seriously when the kids come round to see Scarlett. So I want them kids, from my experience to them, to lift. So if they've left, and the self-awareness aspect of that is how I speak to them, you can see a direct response from how they deal with me from that point on. You're looked upon as someone for them as a positive human being in their lives.
Nice. Yeah.
And so it's a direct response when it comes to children. And so, yeah, I think, and I'm very, very, very passionate about that. And so many people, and unfortunately, I don't do that. But so I think for yourself, test what you say, what you do. That's what I do, you know, and it's almost how you speak to your wife or how you speak to your partners, how you speak to people, how you communicate. You do get back what you give out. And
yeah, I mean, it's a great way to ruin your evening if you come in at the end of a long day and go, I've had a really shit day. You know, because that lowers the mood in the sense of everybody responding to the fact that you've got a negative emotion. And that was something that, I mean, I don't think I'm guilty of that. But it's just that level of awareness to say, you don't have to say exactly what you're feeling, because you have to understand the impact it's going to have on everyone else.
I think, funny enough, just quickly on that, when my wife the other week was saying, I'm feeling really tired, and it went on for like 3 or 4 days, I said, no wonder you're feeling tired.
You convinced yourself.
It's like, you know, if you're feeling a bit under the weather and you're getting a bit of a cold, yeah, you've got a runny nose, but the more you enforce you got a cold, next minute you'll be in bed. So I think, so I don't know, I'm not perfect at this at all. And I think it's an ongoing process where, you know, I go, hang on, I'm giving off some bad vibes here. You know, I'm not helping myself or anybody else around me, you know.
So let's take that back into the institutions then, because you mentioned at the beginning, you know, it's human to human, and we've sort of come full circle in that sense. When you're in those environments where you've got a big faceless institution, you know, and there's a transactional business deal going on, but you realize it's human to human, where do you go with the communications in that kind of environment?
It's actually quite difficult, I've got to say, because it's predominantly it depends on who they are and how they are, but at the end of the day, it's more difficult because it's everything's all telephone numbers. It's very spreadsheet driven. It's very, you know, that's kind of where they all fall back to. So it's a bit more difficult. But yes, ultimately making it less we've found making everything less email and more calls. It's such a simple method, and it's so difficult to get them out of it. And now, importantly, they have to. It's got to be proof, validated. It's got to be in writing. At the end of the day, that's kind of where all this sits. However, the second you start getting people together, you know, how they're, because sometimes it will be how they're talking, you know, something going on. You'll have one party on one side of the fence that's talking to us about the other person. Then you've got the other company telling us about how they feel about the other person. Yet they all get on a Zoom call and they're all particularly friendly with each other. And it's like, why don't you just all be very honest out whatever's your gripes, and it either will work from this point on, or we all shake hands and we all wish everyone well, and it's not going to go forward. At least it can, in the words of Chris Voss, I'm not sure if you're fully a Chris Voss, but
never split the difference.
Yeah, there you go. Search for the nose. The nose. Get the nose. This can't go anywhere. Stop wasting time, and wish everyone well from that point. So I think that's one way we have a small contribution. Yeah.
And I like Patrick Lencioni. He wrote the 5 dysfunctions of a team. One of those dysfunctions is fear of conflict. So if everyone's dancing around everybody else being really nice to each other, and no one can actually honestly and openly express their views, then that's actually a dysfunctional team. You want that moment where someone says, hang on a minute, I'm not comfortable here. Let's just talk this through. So you'll be careful. Yeah.
But that's a muscle you've got to flex, isn't it? You must have known that over the years. It's not, if it's not normal for you, not you, I think if you're a person that's quite, which I am, you like to be liked and you want to, you don't want to be that. But I've had to flex and continually flex it, because I'm like, this isn't going anywhere.
No.
You've got to be the one that has to bring it up. So, but once you do, everyone's like, thank goodness, at least you just needed someone to say it sometimes.
Exactly. So let's take our viewers on that personal development journey then, just to give them a bit of a leg up at the start. If people are looking at this thinking, well, you know what, maybe I'm not very self-aware. Maybe I could do with understanding myself better. Where would you point them? What's the first place to go to start to learn this kind of stuff?
I think one great way is brain food. And brain food is either visual or audio. I think it's what you. I think one. I've had sort of various different sort of mentors over the years, and both visually, i.e., Wayne Dyer or Tony Robbins, or as in what's on video, or actual paid mentors.
Yes.
What tends to be such a repeated pattern is what you're feeding yourself every day. What am I saying to myself every day? How do I feel about myself? Okay, I could physically, yes, I could be improved, and there's all improvements. But essentially, what am I saying to myself? I think that's so important. What you say, you shall be, as all of these type of cliches. I think it's so important. Are you complimenting yourself and complimenting others? I'm talking back to basics. I think it's and it's not necessarily a muscle that's going to feel normal. Complimenting yourself, I think, is not usual, and really flexing the muscle about complimenting others, because I cannot tell you, and that has to be a genuine compliment, not compliment on. For example, if the mother-in-law comes in and she dresses appalling as usual, and I'm not saying my mother-in-law's like that, by the way.
Trouble.
But for the sake of the video, she dresses lovely. But I'm saying, if that was the case, and you're saying, oh, you look, your dress is really nice today, that's not a genuine compliment, because you don't believe it. I think you've got a compliment on what you genuinely believe is a compliment to that person. Then it's completely congruent and you feel good about it. What comes back is so much more. I can't. I'm talking back to basics. So I think that's one way to help. And brain food. What you watch every day. If you're sat there watching the news, I'm sorry, but that's not going to help you. Whether you like, let's be honest, whether you want to hear it or not, it's just not. So I think, what video are you watching, what audios are you listening to, and what books are you reading? I think that's got to be back to basics. And whatever you read, test it.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. My version of that initial thing that you were talking about is, it's what you say to yourself about yourself when you're by yourself. I think that is immensely powerful. My first coach said to me, let's imagine that we're going to connect you up to a printer, and every time you have a thought, we're going to print out that thought, and we'll put them into 2 piles at the end of the day. This is the negative pile, this is the positive pile. What will those look like at the end of the day? apart from the terrifying thought of having my own thoughts printed out,
yeah, that's right.
It was quite an interesting exercise, because you're thinking, yeah, actually, is my dialogue, my internal dialogue, is it a generally positive one, or is it a generally negative one? Really, really powerful stuff.
You've got to, and also you've got to let it flow. We're not, like you say, we're not robots. We're going to have, and at the end of the day, this is an ongoing practice. I'm not, it's not like you a, oh, Carl's got it. He's the Mecca. This is simply just an ongoing process. And someone said to me a long time ago, an elastic band, your elastic band is very strong and will always want to flex back to the original shape. And if you're lazy and not on time, and you're trying to not be lazy and to be on time, well, this is a strong elastic band that needs stretching, and it will take a while for it to create its new shape. And that for me was such good advice, because I've been on time the last 4 times, but all of a sudden I'm now late for the next 10. Is that elastic band's going to keep flexing
back into position?
It's an ongoing thing.
Yeah, and I think it's important that people understand, for example, something that I'd never encountered before, but I learned about fixed mindset versus growth mindset. And now when I speak to my clients and to anybody who, especially when I'm not in coaching mode, this idea that you have been served a pack of cards, a hand of cards, and that's it, is often what holds people back. And when you say to them, well, actually, depending on how you're thinking about life, we could add to those cards that you've got in your hand, and you could have some new skills and some new ideas. The growth mindset, to me, seems to be vitally important as well.
And the thing is, look, we've all, I'm, a few years away from 50 now, and I feel in my complete infancy when it comes to still trying to understand. And I've been doing this for probably 10, 12 years. I've tried of this constant non-stop trying to improve, and it's not. I mean, some people that I speak to, I don't know, a new dad mate or something like that, whatever, and you might talk about something, and you can tell some people look at it and go, oh, this must be exhausting, trying to be this. We're talking about into the context of this, but it's just living, isn't it? Let's be honest. It's just that's it. It's just living, and you just why would you not want to be a better human?
Exactly. And what a journey that is to go on.
Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah. So, I mean, just before we finish up then, anything else that's going on in either Midgard or anything else that you're doing that you would like to share with the viewers as a final comment?
Yeah, of course. I just want to bore people with what kind of jobs I'm doing and things, but essentially, in short, last year, a wonderful company called AIS Utilities, which is a sort of high voltage, big, huge electric substations that go into big developments. I've been working with them also from last year. Brilliant company. Couple of sort of early 30s. In fact, I think they're 30 that own the business. Work with them is brilliant, and obviously it's a great opportunity to work with them, and it kind of serves all similar clients. So it was a good way of an additional way to earn income, and also at the same time they're a brilliant business to work with. So I have kind of these alternative routes to how you exist, but that's really good. And also just to finish, I'm really excited, myself and a friend of mine, actually a holiday mate. We went to Turkey recently on holiday and met very, very, very good people out there, lovely family. And Louis, ex-military, you would another time, if that's cool, Gary, we'll have another chat if that's okay. But
yeah, of course.
We've just created our own podcast. We're just about to start called Look Lively is what the podcast is called. And
brilliant.
So we're very excited by that. So at any point, if you look at Look Lively Pod on Instagram and YouTube, but we're talking all sorts of trying to be your best human self, all kinds of life stuff, kids, parenting, all of it talked about. And so we're looking. That's going to be an exciting project. But
no, I like the sound of that. Carl, like I said, I could talk all afternoon. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to do that. So let me just say we've covered a lot of ground there, and I've absolutely loved hearing your views on all of those different things. And I really appreciate you spending the time with me on the Business Spotlight. Thank you very much.